Alrighty. Now that he's chartable, let's talk about motivation, man. The House of Spiders, the Pinky Apprentice Sinclair, exists to do one thing, and one thing only. A metric ton of damage. He's based off of Ren from Canto 9's story, and is pretty much the guy that studied the blade. While you were reading the Cloudburst blade, he was studying the blade. While you were out following the magic beeper, he was studying the blade. And while you were out admiring corpus art, he was the one making the corpses. Though he may never inherit a star in this lifetime, Renclair is a fantastic damage dealer. Anyhow, for all intents and purposes, Renclair is a rather easy to use beat stick. While he isn't quite win rate, so to speak, he is still very easy to use with a little thoughts on how to get his engine going. Then he becomes a win rate savant after that. Since he's a modern ID, it's best to start with his passives, as that'll pretty much inform the entirety of his kit's playstyle. Singular Strike, Singular Focus of the Mind, is his always on passive. Turn end, the fella converts Poise potency over 25 into Moonlit Azure Blade. Moonlit Azure Blade is a unique buff that grants him 2 shield and 1% damage on crits per stack. This caps out at 20, so 40 shield and 20% damage across his skills. Yes, this damage boost will pretty much be entirely across his skills, since he'll need 25 potency to start anyway. And well, as we will come to soon see, his count generation is very healthy. Oh, that and having 25 potency means he's critting on everything anyway. Heck, he would have always crit on 20. Besides that buff, the passive grants a 5 SP heal and slash power up if he didn't slot any attack skills. Next is the Orthodox Blade. This is a 2 Pride Resonance passive that grants him Poise at combat start, equal to Pride Resin divided by 2 plus 1. For the bare minimum activation, we get 2 Poise for him. When maxed out though, he gains up to 4 Poise. This kind of scaling resonance passive is quite cool to see. On the same banner, Lamp Gregor also had a similarly scaling resonance passive, so perhaps we'll be getting more scaling ones like these in the future. Aside from the Poise stim, he gains 1 Poise count if he has over 20 Poise at combat end. These 2 passives are geared towards stacking up a ridiculous amount of Poise to then flush out with his skills. The Resonance passive is very important, as it functionally removes the end of turn Poise count decay from him entirely. Well, at least so long as we can keep a 2 Pride Resin going at a minimum. What's the catch beyond needing to play Bejeweled then? Well, let's for once start with the defense skills, as he has 2 of them. His first skill is aptly named Defend. It's a clashable guard with +2 defense level. On combat start, it gains him a whopping 8 Poise and 2 Poise counts. If we fulfill his Resonance passive, even to a minimum, with this thing slotted, that's 10 Poise for free pretty much, which for anyone is a huge ass stim. Unfortunately, the Poise count gain will leave him on 1 Poise count the following turn, thanks to decay, at least for now. Now, if he has over 25 Poise, we get Swerve slotted instead. This gains shield equal to Moonlit Azure Blade and grants +4 Poise count. Logically, a +3 with decay factored in on a single slot. At the point of getting Swerve, this man will pretty much always be Poise count positive and just continually get more and more out of hand. Well, so long as we make use of it every other turn. Anyhow, if we evade an attack with this, he gains a crit damage up the next turn, stacking up to twice. These are 2 insanely strong defense skills, with one specific issue. They deal no damage. They're not counter, it's just purely defensive while turboing his Poise and stabilizing it. Neither of them get any additional power either, no coin power or base power, so they'll always roll at their base. Thankfully, the Clashable can depower attacks on a loss, and the evade can net him 20 extra shield for a total of 60 with a max stack of Moonlit Azure Blade, so at least he won't die. So with his engine out of the way, let's look at how he can actually make use of it. Skill 1 is Chain Strike. It's a 2 coiner that gains 3 Poise counts, meaning it is neutral on use with decay. Positive even if we have more than 20 Poise and activate his Resonance passive. Aside from that, it nets him up to 4 Poise potency, inflicts 2 bleed count, and can get him up to 2 haste. Actually not bad for a skill 1 by any stretch of the imagination. If we're critting with this thing, it can hit surprisingly hard, especially with Moonlit Azure Blade in tow. 20% from the crit and 20% from this passive. Rather solid if anything, since most S1s in the game aren't going to get percent damage boosts anyway. Heck, if he's got crit damage up, that's another 20%. Huh, even the S1 can hit for good numbers, eh? Anyhow, skill 2, Nameless Slash. Notably out the gate, it's a free weight, unfocused volley, meaning it can randomly ping between 3 targets. Remember, first hit will always be on the main. Anyhow, this one gains base power instead of coin power. We'll see why that's relevant in a moment. The first hit boosts his poise and grants a count, whereas the second coin here only gains a count but inflicts 2 bleed, but on a critical heads hit, will reuse the coin, and if at 10 or more Moonlit Azure Blade stacks, reuse it again on a heads hit to boot. From my understanding, this means that if the second coin crits on heads, we'll reuse. Then if that reuse also hits heads with the blade stacks, we reuse one more time. Basically, this thing is a 4-coiner once the right conditions are met and RNG permits. You can probably see why coin power isn't on offer here. Otherwise, each coin power would be worth 10 base power. Instead, with 4 coins, each base is only granting 1, so we're looking at plus 8 base power for fulfilling his status conditionals. And why wouldn't you fulfill them? They're so easy to do with his defense skill in tow and his engine going. This means we'll be dealing out up to 6 bleed potency with this skill. Not amazing, but still relevant. Aside from that, the second coin has a 10% boost to damage on crit. Compared to skill 1, that's up to a 70% boost through his kit, though only on the last 3 coins, 60% on the first. Still a stupid amount nonetheless. For skill 3, we're looking at his Motivational Slash, the only skill with a proper, unique name, Polestar Slayer. The first line is one of the more concerning ones. Deal 50% more damage for each excess attack weight beyond number of targets. Skipping ahead a moment, this thing can go up to 3 attack weight. If we're looking at something similar, it would be Bones Claiming. This skill, however, is more flexible, since Bones Claiming is 100% on a single target, whereas this one can still do 50% on 2 targets. So while Bones Claiming will only hit 2 targets for 100%, this fella can slap 2 targets for 150%. You can see why this stopgap makes a huge difference in damage potential. But I digress. It's a single coin that can go unbreakable with 20 stacks of his unique buff. He gains 5 coin power based on Poise and 5 base power based on Moonlit Azure Blade, meaning his conditionals offer him 10 extra power to a total of 32. Not crazy high, still above 30, but it isn't exactly a Blazing Strike. The fact that it's AoE, however, means Blazing Strike could never catch up, even with its conditionals maxed out. Anyhow, on a critical hits, this deals 70% increased damage, and of course deals 25% of the coin's final damage as slash damage. Now this kind of conversion-based damage can be stupid strong, since it scales off of the hits rather than anything else, meaning it bloody double dips, especially on a staggered target. Oh right, this thing also deals 5 bleed and gains 7 poise. There's also a part here where after the attack he loses up to 5 of his unique buff for each attack weight generated using it, so up to 10. But with the plus 7 poise and even a sprinkle of his passive, the loss is negligible. The main reason to account for this is if you need it for more damage later in the same turn, or otherwise for the skill 2's conditional. So if the fella is double slotted, it's preferred if this skill goes second instead of first. If you somehow end up using 2 of them back to back in the same turn, the second one won't hit as hard as you may expect, due to the loss of Moonlit Azure Blade. If you want a bit more math, using one of these is losing 10 stacks of the buff at maximum stacks. If it's his only attack that turn, then he'll gain 7 back from the skill alone, due to the 7 poise gained by using it. With the passive going to its minimum, that'll be 9 back. And if it's with a 4 resin, or he has another slot that can gain him poise, he'll be back to maximum stacks. On the other hand, if he uses 2 in a row, the first one will eat 10 at max stacks, and the second one will only eat 5 since it can only gain 1 attack weight, and thus not consume quite as much. Since between the 2 you'd gain back 14 poise, you will only lose out on 1 stack. If there's a passive going at all, he'll be back at maximum stacks once again without any effort. Though, you will lose out on 50% on the second hit. Anyhow, when fully motivated, this thing has a 230% boost in attack damage, 60% from the rest of his kits, 70% from the coin, and of course 100% on a single target. If it's spread around, it'll be a boost of 130% on 3 targets instead. Regardless, this thing hits bloody hard. The last 25% echo should be counted separately. I'll likely do so from here on out since it threw off my math wildly for Lamp Gregor's video. That one has gone to the mistakes tracker already, so don't worry about calling that out further. Speaking of which, echo damage is very much a slippery slope. Just ask a Grand Blue Fantasy player how many sources of bonus damage they have or how much supplemental damage they have in their grid. They'll give you a 100-yard stare as the Guild War PTSD begins to set in. So what can we do with Motivation Man? Where can we slot him? Rather, how the heck should we be using him? Well, if we want the most out of his kits, he'll be needing a Resonance team. More specifically, a Pride Resonance team to keep his engine healthy. That conjures up the Blade Lineage, perhaps the Full Stop, the typical suspects for a Poise Pride setup. But what if we want someone to motivate him more? What if we look at my favorite Resonance ID and her trio? Let's make a Bleed Poise team. First off, say hello to the captain again. We're mostly looking at her S2 this time around, due to it being Pride and of course granting a sweet assist attack. In this particular case, Renclair is actually lower in speed than her, sitting at a 4 to 6, so long as he doesn't have haste. This means he'll actually have decent odds of being the one going after her, plus being the target of the assist attack and damage ups. Renclair's S1 is actually quite good when used this way, especially early on, as it'll apply 2 bleed counts and for all intents and purposes, goes Poise positive a good chunk of the time. It also gives him a haste for free, 2 if he happens to crit on that second coin. This is one of those examples of a really good S1 to make use of with assist attack. Aside from that, getting Poise from Captain of the Quad or Harpoon of Obsession pushes along his game plan a decent bit. Do note, however, due to his own passive, his SP may be a little too healthy to get the benefit, but only if he wins the clash with his defensive skill. Otherwise, if he loses with the Clashable Guard, Ishmael can yo-yo his SP back upwards. Her S1 is also pretty notable here. Giving him aggro means he'll be able to push his defense skills more reliably. Couple that with the protection stack and voila, he becomes surprisingly tanky with the shield even if he gets hits. The defense power is also a pretty good plus, pushing him over to +4 on the guard, meaning more often than not, he can likely get an extra clash power. Anyhow, last to mention for this ID specifically is her own defense skill. It's a light SP heal, but it is Pride, meaning we can guarantee Renclair's passive at all times. In terms of ego, we're mainly looking at Blind Obsession. It's damage up, sanity, and poise that can push out more damage. If we overclock it, it's also AoE Pride Fragility, meaning Renclair's S2 can slap multiple targets quite hard with its unfocused volley. Next up is Pequod Heathcliff. This guy doesn't quite have as useful a Pride skill, but it does make up half his kit as his S1. It gives him poise count and inflicts some bleed. Nothing crazy, but nonetheless, something for Renclair to use for resonance. As for the rest of his kit, he's quite self-sufficient with it all. He generates plenty of envy to activate his own passive for the bonus offense and defense level, as well as the Berserker-style damage buff from missing HP. The S2 will help us with maintaining bleed inside of this composition. If anything, the extra count will go quite far this time around. On the other hand, his S3 will pretty much never get its coin power, but honestly that's fine. We could tech for it by slotting a Hex now on Sinclair, that of which gives Sinclair a bunch of defensive buffs if conditions are met. But it's less something to keep in mind and more just an edge case possibility. As for egos, it's binds. In any resonance composition, having a Heathcliff is essential for this ego alone. Or that offense level means Sinclair will clash well and deal more damage so long as Heathcliff is around to boost those resonance chains. Heck, he can even do them using his Wrath counter. For the last member of the quad, we're looking at Yi Sung. Man is a gimmick ID, all revolving around his S2, Relentless Stabbing. Otherwise, he has a Pride S1 and Evade, letting him add a level of consistency to the Pride resonance along the rest. Now, aside from the stupidity that is a 5-coin Relentless Stabbing, he offers a weirdly high amount of bleed count, specifically on that S3. If you can't guess already, most of his inclusion was specifically for his compatibility with Ishmael and his nicer playing Sin affinities. If we get a future Poise ID, perhaps next week, that has a good amount of Pride, perhaps, he could substitute in here. Now, as for egos, we're staring at one of them, and it's to get the full value out of Renclair's damage resistance types. Say it with me, foul bullets. Renclair has a 2x Pierce Fatality, and at base also has 2x Pride Fatality, due to being Sinclair. He also has a -2 defense level, meaning he's a shockingly good fell bullet target. Rather, he's the second best after base Sinclair, as even Blade Lineage Sinclair has 4 more defense level than him. Anyhow, I said Renclair exists to do a fuck ton of damage. Well, even in his death, he exists to be a damage pinata. So, who's next on the Poise agenda then? Well, another Season 3 bro, Twin Hook Gregor. This guy probably gets the most out of the bleed in this composition. He's got Pride on his S2, so not the most consistent to stim Renclair, but he does get a good amount of value from both Poise and bleed. More specifically, his whole game plan revolves around fueling his S3 with unjust enrichments. Since we've got some decent bleed application with the Quad Trio, he can pretty much always get unjust enrichment stacks on hits with his passive. Once he has 4 of it, he can dump it out on his S3 for pretty big damage, especially on crits. It's also bonus damage, which is quite nuts. We can pretty much ignore egos this time around. The composition can fuel Unbrilliant Glory, but it isn't super high priority. Now for the last fixed member of the team, we want Roshu. A few of them are quite solid here, rather there's 3 options I can recommend here since they're all good for something. First is the bleed support, Kurokumo Ryoshu. She exists to keep the count healthy. With her on the team, it'll pretty much never die as long as she lands her S2 or S3. Speaking of which, the S2 is Pride. The lust on her skills also helps fuel binds specifically. The next potential option is Maid Ryoshu. If keeping bleed on target isn't as important, we can use the more self-sufficient Maid Shu, the AoE clear through unfocused encounters, giving us 2 IDs with easy access to AoEs to help clean up encounters faster. Her spread of affinities is also quite solid here, since she has Pride on her S2 and Lust on her S1, letting her fuel egos and resonances quite nicely. As for option 3, well, we could slot in Dayushu. The affinities are particularly good since she has a Pride defense skill to boot. However, as she doesn't have Lust, we'll need to make a different concession for the next pick. Regardless, just pick a Roshu and run her based on your needs. If all you care for is raw damage, pick between the latter 2. Otherwise, Kurokumo will do the job to upkeep some modicum of bleed. The egos we mostly want for a Calgia. This will keep Poise healthy across the board, especially as we'll be getting plenty of absolute Pride resonances. Anyhow, we can also use her capstone with enough Lust. It'll crit for big damage and of course apply some bleed while letting whichever Ryoshu you pick scale up her damage. When I said last fixed member, it's for a specific reason. This composition can be underslotted. Rather, for focused encounters, I'd recommend underslotting to let Renclair get an additional slot to have more uptime on his damage and more freely use his defense skill. If you underslot, don't use Dayushu, as we'll entirely lose out on Lust. The next member is the last one I'd recommend using at least. Faust has 2 options here, both of which are okay. For the Poise agenda, you'd be looking at She Faust. She can make use of the bleed for coin power and of course has Pride on her skill 2 to fuel Renclair's passive. On top of that, she provisions Lust affinity for binds and other egos. If you decide to use Dayushu, you should probably take her to supplement for Lust's absence. Otherwise, her whole gimmick is kinda underwhelming. Rather, Renclair just does what she wants to do, but better. She can't maintain Poise to save her life, so be wary of that. Alternatively, if Lust isn't the concern, go take Blade Lineage Faust. While she doesn't provision as much damage on her lonesome, she does apply Red Plum Blossom, that of which offers more crit damage. She of course also has a Pride skill too, which while not the most ideal, does help fuel Renclair nonetheless. As for egos, it's the second for a Calgia. This one gives potency and counts, which helps nullify the Poise decay from end of turn. Since Sinclair is neutral to positive, this pretty much funnels the guy into positive territory on everything but his skill 3. His S1 gives 3, his passive gives +1, and for a Calgia would give 1 more, meaning the 2 coins only lose us 2 on crits and leave us with 3 to decay down to 2, making him exceedingly positive. All the better if he's using it on an assist attack. The S2 is much the same, getting a counts per coin and +1 from the passive, making it neutral. This, for a Calgia, would bump it to a +1. The skill 3 has nothing, but +1 from the passive and +1 from this ego makes it entirely neutral even with decay. Regardless, this thing is bloody fantastic if we do make use of it. Anyhow, pair she with Dai Yu. or Blade Lineage with any of the others, and Prophets for unfocused encounters, or if you wish to run 7 members and avoid underslotting. For the bench riders, we're taking the usual suspects. Tingtang Honglu and LCB Rodya are easy damage stims for the team. Rodya will miss Renclair, but Hongers will pretty much always hit him. If you somehow pick a composition that doesn't have Gluttony, you can substitute in full stop Hongers for more damage with Gregor's S3 instead of the generic damage bump. As for Otis, LCB or BL is fine for conditional damage boosts. BL to double tap, LCB for a more general boost, albeit harder to obtain due to lower sloth generation than Pride. As for a little bump in Poise generation, we can place BL Don in the back in order to spread around more Poise potency as required. Finally, we can take BL Musso for Swordplay of the Homeland, support skill, not the buff. Since Renclair generates Poise the fastest, and the rest of the fellas don't get past 25 until far later in an encounter, we can use this passive for 15% more slash damage on the fella. So what about play patterns? Well, starting off, slot him as number 1 in deployment, since he'll want as many support bonuses as possible. It will also make him the target of Ishmael's assist attack if he ties with someone at lower speed, next to her on the dashboard. If you don't care quite as much about the support passives, you could also slot him as number 2 and leave Ishmael as number 1. This means that if he ties in speed with Ishmael, he'll be the next unit instead of the one before her. Don't do this for focused encounters, as we'll be underslotting in order to allow him to get 2 skill slots. For focused encounters, take the main 6 including Roshu with Lust. Otherwise, you can take 7 Sinners including Faust if you'd rather not underslot. As for the example, we'll be running underslotted. On turn 1, aim for a 4 Pride Resonance, a Wrath, and a Lust. Renclair should slot their defensive skill. With 6 Sinners, we won't be able to get enough resources for a turn 2 for a Calgia, but we can get some of the resources started. Anyhow, with the defensive slotted and a Pride Resonance of 4, we'll start next turn with 11 Poise and 1 count due to Decay. If we got particularly lucky and managed to slot in Ishmael's S2 for an assist attack targeting Renclair, we'll get an extra 3 Poise count and 4 Poise potency. Even if both crits, we've generated 5 Poise count, losing 3 including Decay, leaving us at 15 Poise and 2 count. This would be the most ideal scenario by far. Anyhow, on turn 2, we're fishing for more Poise, though with 2 slots on Renclair, we can also do some funny stuff. Use one of his slots for a defense skill to get that ridiculous Poise boost once again. Aim one more time for a 4 Pride for another 11 Poise total at base. Even without the assist attack, we're sitting on 22 Poise. If we've got it on both, that's straight to 30 Poise even. That said, for his second slots, we're looking to use either his S1 or S2. The S1 would provide another 4 potency and a count, whereas the S2 provisions 3 potency and otherwise goes count neutral. It'll only reroll once at this stage, however. If you want to S3, we can get 7 more potency, which may be particularly insane, but in lacking the Moonlit Azure Blade, won't do quite as much damage as we'd otherwise like. Regardless, on turn 2, we could already be at up to 30 Poise, just with a defense and assist attack on both turns. Otherwise up to 33 to 37 depending on which skill we decided to use. As the turn end passive would trigger at this point, we are also allowed to start ignoring Decay. Even if we minimum roll and get no assist attacks, we would be at 25 at the lowest, as long as we get a 4 Pride Resin on both turns and slot a defense skill on both turns, and even if we use a skill too. Yeah, he just turbos up this bloody fast. Alright, that could be like 39 if we somehow get a Pride Resonance of 6 on both turns, so yeah, fun times. We'd literally be a single point off of maximum conversion. If we want to just get an ideal amount after all of that math, turn 1, 4 Pride Resonance, a defense skill and an assist attack gets us to 15. Turn 2, 6 Pride Resonance, a defense skill and an assist attack is 16 more, plus a skill 1 places us at exactly 35, meaning we get 10 Moonlit Azure Blade for turn 3. That would be the most ideal turbo kickstart, at least. Then using the Lust, Wrath, and 5 Pride, we can drop a Roshu for a Calgia on turn 3, alongside using Renclair's S2s for the Resonance bonuses. Since most of the others will unfortunately be drained of Pride resources, we'll have to make do with however much Pride Resonance we end up with. This will help stabilize the rest of the team and keep everyone going comfortably. With Renclair's S2s, he only needs 10 Moonlit Azure Blade to re-roll his coins. The main point of trouble will be his SP, however. This won't be a problem if he won his clashes leading up to this point, but if he lost any, the rerolls may just completely miss. On average, if he won on turn 1, he'll be at 15 to 17 SP. If he wins both on turn 2, this places him another 20 to 24 roughly, meaning he'd start turn 3 with 35 to 41 SP. As long as he wins one more clash, he'll be hitting those rerolls. Now the main advantage of using him in a double slot is being able to abuse his evade for more critical damage. On turn 3 we can slot one defensive for that evade, and an S2 to let him clash for SP before dumping out some damage. Alternatively, we'll want as much poise as possible to convert, meaning on ideal setup listed above, we'd need to make up 10 more poise. An S1, S2, and 4 Pride Resin will do it, otherwise 2 S1s and a 2 Pride Resin. You can do the math from there. Heck, a 6 Pride Resin with 2 S2s will get him there. On turn 4, we can then let rip with maximum Moonlit Azure Blade stacks on his S3 to otherwise dump out his damage. All in all, it's a 4-turn plan that requires all the Pride to align, but you can see how it would play out potentially. The main issues of contention are those assist attacks though. You'll need to get exceedingly lucky, otherwise you can probably expect to wait another turn or two to finally dump out the damage on his S3. That said, with 2 slots, those S3s are going to rotate in more often, so even if we roll low, the game plan can still be quite stable, just a little longer winded. Heck, if we delay another turn or two, we can get that critical damage from his defense skill and perhaps fire off another ego to amp damage or offense level. The flexibility of this guy is quite a lot, so long as he's got his engine going. Just make sure to never drop below a Pride Resonance of 2 and we're golden. Heck, with this composition, it's pretty much impossible to go under 2 due to the range of defense skills available to us. Plus, while the joke is that this guy is Motivation Man, it really isn't that hard to get him going. Heck, even if we run 7 Sinners and ignore the double slot advantages, he'll maybe take an extra turn to get fire in, but otherwise, he's pretty much the golden boy, just at the cost of his hair. Thanks for tuning in once again. There's not too much fancy tech I can show off this time around outside reviving Pride Resonance. I know this video is a bit on the later end of things considering everyone else is pretty much done covering this guy, but I figure that fellas would appreciate a guide after he's had a week to cook longer, and well, he's shardable for everyone now. For upcoming events, I'll likely be putting out a one-shot live play of my TTRPG system by the end of the month, or start of next month. We've got Project Moon content for it thanks to a mate, so look forward to that I suppose. Aside from that, I'm looking for collaborators on a Library of Ruina draft run, the kind where you auction off units that you're allowed to use. Well, in this case, likely either key pages or receptions. More details to come later this week. And finally, the Discord is always open. It's gotten more lively in there, so feel free to join up. So expect a lot of pings from me posting polls or going live, etc. Once again, if you enjoyed the content, hit like on the video to show you want more, and of course, subscribe to see future content. Each sub goes a long way these days since I'm still on the smaller end of things, and your support is massively appreciated. Post didn't appreciate the slander and wishes to prove that they're better for the underslot composition, so here's editing eco with a different play pattern. First, replace Roshu with Faust. She-Faust is preferred. Turn 1, 5 Pride, 1 Sloth, defense skill on Sinclair. Make sure assist attack lands on Sinclair. This generates exactly 5 Pride, 1 Gloom, and 1 Sloth, which is exactly enough for a turn 2 for a Calgia from Faust. It also gives Sinclair 15 poise to start. Turn 2, slot for a Calgia and at least 6 Pride, defense skill on Sinclair, and any skill for the second skill. If assist attack somehow comes up again, that's 8 from defense, 4 from passive, 6 from Calgia, and 4 from assist attack, and 3 to 7 depending on Sinclair's skill choice. That's up to 32 poise, planting Sinclair at 47 poise. If Captain of the Pequod somehow triggers to boot, and somehow lands on him, that's 4 more for 51 poise. False inclusion can get us maximum Moonlit Azure Blade stacks by turn 3. False rests her case.